century, mankind has made remarkable strides, reaching beyond the bounds of the planet Earth into the unexplored realms of space. Yesterday, the moon was man's limit, but tomorrow it may be the stars.
Altitude 5,200 feet. Senior, go for landing, over. Roger, go for landing, 3,000 feet.
As yet, no one knows what these missions may encounter. New worlds to explore. Distant civilizations with which we may communicate. Or could it be that long ages ago, the cosmic connection was already forged, with the evidence preserved in the relics of ancient man? Such at least is the belief of a growing contingent of investigators around the globe, fascinated by the notion that extraterrestrial visitors may have left their mark on mankind's past. Today, the subject is one of immense popular interest, guaranteed to sell papers from Peking to Peoria, from Boston to Buenos Aires. The focus of much of the attention is the Andean nation of Peru, birthplace of one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. Here, in the capital city of Lima, archaeologist Dr. Raul Agurto is engaged in the detailed study of the strange drawings produced by a peculiar people who populated Peru's arid Paracas Peninsula some 2,000 years ago. Over the course of several decades, Dr. Agurto has patiently assembled a collection of curious stones engraved with unusual images, records of a long-lost age. Here may be seen lifelike creatures unknown to modern science, images that recur in pieces of pottery from the civilization of ancient China, far across the globe. To Dr. Agurto and his colleagues, the images on the rocks belong to the common heritage of man, acquired, they believe, by the intervention of astronauts from outer space. But the silent stones are not the sole remains of the Paracas people, for the desolate plain has yielded up relics of a surprisingly advanced society, one which produced multi-hued textiles of the finest cotton, and one which took pains to preserve its dead nobility according to techniques of embalming similar to those employed at about the same time by the skilled morticians of the ancient Egyptians. Mummification, according to Dr. Agurto, may have been another technique learned from the celestial voyagers, a way of preserving bodies until the space travelers return from their missions to awaken them at last to a new and glorious life. Other scientists argue, however, that the embalming of the dead is merely a means of seeking to prolong our allotted time on the earthly plane, an heroic, if ultimately futile gesture in the face of the inevitability of mortality and decay. That the process of mummification succeeds so admirably in coastal Peru, as in Egypt, may have much to do with the extreme aridity of the climate, which preserves organic matter almost indefinitely. Not far from the graveyard of Paracas lies a great desert lake, the legendary Lake Titicaca, birthplace of the gods. Today, the mythic Uros, whose origin remains unknown, still ply the lake with their balsa reed boats, as their ancestors did centuries before the birth of Christ. In the tradition of the Uros, a great white god, Tiki Viracocha, the worker of miracles, arose from the lake, a tale which stirs the imagination of those seeking further evidence of the visit to Peru of personages from outer space. The legends of the lake are kept alive today by the villagers who dwell by its shores. Each year, during the Feast of Corpus Christi, the Aymara Indians perform the mystical Diablada dance, a celebration of the rebirth of the dead and an invocation of the dormant powers of Tiki Viracocha, the giant god. According to some observers, the ornate masks worn by the villagers bear a striking resemblance to space helmets, a memory they claim of the headgear worn by the galactic visitors. Are these then the effigies of beings from other planets, other galaxies perhaps? Are these the gods of Titicaca? Or are they nothing more or less than the fanciful fabrications of a highly inventive people who seek to relieve the monotony of their earthly lives with an outburst of color and creativity? And yet, the enigma remains, preserved for eternity in stone, 12 miles south of Lake Titicaca, the ruins of the ancient temple complex of Tiwanaku, the metropolis, some say, of an antediluvian race that survived a worldwide catastrophe in the high plateaus of the Andes. But who really built Tiwanaku? Unfortunately, their remains tell us little. Only that the people of Tiwanaku were men, not unlike ourselves, vulnerable to the ravages of time. When the Incas ruled Peru, Tiwanaku was already a ruin, and the Aymara could tell their conquerors nothing of the city's history. Though the men who built the metropolis possessed neither the wheel nor a written language, their artifacts speak massive volumes to those who claim to be able to read the message. Here, on this inhospitable plateau, the weeping god of Tiwanaku stands eternal guard over the gateway to the sun, through which once passed the priests who presided over the cult of the ancient miracle men. In these figures, some investigators see the visage not of a god, but of an astronaut, the great white emissary from outer space. In Peruvian museums may be found images of similar figures, men whose features bear little resemblance to those of the Indians of the area. Again, we ask, are these the portraits of space travelers? or merely the stylized works of imaginative artisans of ancient times? Some say the answer is to be sought here, along the desert coast of the Paracas Peninsula. It was the gaudy flamingos of Paracas Bay which inspired General San Martin to design the Peruvian flag. And some believe these same flamingos may have inspired the long-lost peoples of the peninsula to attempt one of the boldest enterprises of ancient man, the conquest of the sky. Today, as in the past, the brown pelican is a familiar fixture of life along the Peruvian coast. And it's not surprising that the figure of the bird appears in the rock etchings of the Paracan people. What is surprising, however, is the representation of men astride the birds, voyaging through the skies. A colorful fantasy? Perhaps. But what of the other images of a man riding in a capsule below? And what of this figure? To all appearances, the men on these stones seem to be gazing through telescopes, as if they were studying the stars. Or perhaps watching for earthbound spaceships. Could the birdmen of Paracas be portraits of the ancient astronauts themselves, preserved for millennia in stone? Certainly, space travel was a preoccupation with the Paracas people. But should we assume that this was anything more than the normal fascination of men with the phenomenon of flight? To some, the parallels with our own day are irresistible. And for them, it requires only a short leap of the imagination to place the ancient Peruvians in space 4,000 years before Apollo or Soyuz. According to the hypothesis, these, then, were not birds which the men of Paracas rode, but sophisticated rockets designed for interplanetary travel. To many, the idea may seem far-fetched, but there is other evidence. Incredible embroidered mantles that seem to depict images of alien beings, or of men in elaborate space helmets, similar to those worn by contemporary astronauts and cosmonauts. The Paracas tapestries were made to be buried with the dead, anticipating perhaps a flight to the great beyond, to the land from which the space colonists came. Just as in our day, men long to explore the cosmos, to push back the frontiers, and to penetrate the promising domain that always seems to wait just beyond our reach. So may the men of Paracas have longed to leave their barren land, to travel with the birds and spacemen into an eternity of time, a utopia in which all their dreams would be fulfilled. It is a recurring theme, this notion of escape into outer space. In all the varied products of Paracan art can be seen, with a little imagination, the ghostly images of planetary travelers rendered in the stylized manner of the day. Is it conceivable that ships like these transported the ancient voyagers on their journeys to the Earth? If so, then one of the foremost mysteries of the modern day might be solved. Here, in a remote mountain valley in southern Peru, a curious culture flourished in the first millennium BC. A society which invested incredible human resources in the construction of monumental earthworks, strange lines and figures scratched in the dark desert soil. In fact, the entire Nazca Valley, 40 miles long and 9 miles wide, was literally a gigantic drawing board on which an ancient people etched images visible only from the air. How the Nazcas accomplished the task is a puzzlement to scientists, for so precise are some of the lines that they could not be bettered by modern-day engineers working with the best geometrical instruments. According to speculation, the Nazca lines were intended as beacons or as landing fields for craft approaching the Earth from space, a theory which could account for the precise linear configurations. But if these were to be runways, the space travelers would have to be prepared for a bumpy landing, since many of the lines run over gullies and across the crest of hills. An alternative explanation has recently been advanced, that the earthworks were designed for the Nazcas themselves, hovering above the valley in hot air balloons, woven from native cotton and inflated by great bonfires on the desert floor. This theory would explain the fanciful nature of many of the figures. Images, perhaps, of Nazca deities, painstakingly reproduced to please the ancient balloonists, or very possibly, to appease the gods of the sky watching from the heavens. To test the idea, Jim Woodman and Julian Knott reconstructed a native balloon and suspended below it, soared above the valley as the Nazca nobility may once have done. In their view, this was the real triumph of the Nazca, not the deification of visitors from space, but the creative innovation that made them the first men to escape the narrow confines of the Earth. Mathematician Maria Reich has been studying the Nazca lines for over 30 years, constructing a detailed map of the entire valley and comparing the configuration of the drawings with the ancient constellations of the southern hemisphere. According to Dr. Reich, many of the lines and drawings suggest an astronomical calendar, a device which may have proved useful to the people of the valley in predicting the annual onset of floods and droughts. On the other hand, the American astronomer Gerald Hawkins has concluded from computer studies that the lunar, solar, and stellar alignments are no better than those which would be expected from chance. Landing fields, components of a giant calendar, or merely ceremonial figures to be enjoyed by bold balloonists. The enigma remains to haunt the imagination of men. A few hundred miles north of the Nazca Valley lies the Galera Pampa, a high, grassy plain where the llama and alpaca graze, sturdy descendants of the wild guanaco, which roamed the Altiplano in the days of Tijuanaco. Today, as in the past, the hardy camels of the Andes are an essential part of life, contributing their meat, their wool, and the strength of their backs to the stout herdsmen of the highlands. In ancient times, the guanaco is known to have ranged to the coast, and remains of these and other characteristic creatures of Peru have been found associated with the bones of the Paracas people. Also from excavations on the peninsula have come figures of creatures strange to our eyes, including giant squid and sea serpents, as well as animals which strongly resemble dinosaurs, extinct for over 100 million years. Professor Louis Bebier of the Tello Museum in Peru is a paleontologist who has studied the mystery of the dinosaurs, forerunners on the evolutionary tree of the modern-day reptiles and birds. According to the latest theory, the dinosaur clan rose to preeminence in the early Mesozoic era, when the temperature of the ancient Earth was relatively stable and tropical conditions spread almost from pole to pole. These were conditions ideally conducive to the development of grand, lethargic creatures, animals that required an enormous energy ration in order to survive. But the end of the Mesozoic, around 100 million years ago, saw a drastic decline in the dinosaurs' fortunes. For now, with the breakup of the ancient continents, climates were rapidly changing, and new environments brought tough new challenges for all living things. Faced with competition from more agile, more versatile creatures, the dinosaurs succumbed on a massive scale, leaving no living representative of their order. Among the most peculiar of the dinosaur clan were the leather-winged pterodactyls and the gigantic stegosaurus, a beast with fish-like fins along its spinal crest. Curiously, it is exactly these forms which appear etched on the stones found on the Paracas Peninsula. Figures of animals that had vanished from the earth millions of years before the earliest man-like beings appeared in the record of evolution. Professor Bevier finds the subject particularly fascinating, especially since most of the stones depict dinosaurs and men together. Could it be that a few dinosaurs lingered on with the men of Peru, lost in the high valleys of the Andes almost to modern times? Or could it be that men of some sort inhabited our planet 100 million years ago? On the igneous rocks of Spain's Logroño province are embedded the footprints of a two-footed tridactyl dinosaur of a type which flourished in the region of the mid-Mesozoic era. The site, now a fertile farmland, was once a marshy slough in which the giant reptiles fed. Paleontologists from the Spanish Academy of Mines who have studied the prints have no doubt about their authenticity, and analyses performed on the surrounding rocks have established their vintage as at least 100 million years. From the size of the prints and their pedigree, the scientists have deduced that the genus was Megalosaurus, one of the largest of the two-footed dinosaurs, a creature very definitely not a contemporary of modern man. From a study of the dinosaur tracks, much of interest can be learned concerning the life and times of the giant beast. But Logroño's fame derives from a discovery even more amazing. Here, in the same rock formation, is the clear impression of a human foot. Whose foot? An ancient astronaut? Or a clever forger? Answer, unfortunately, may never be known. Whether or not the old peoples of Peru were conversant with dinosaurs may remain a matter of speculation, but this much is clear. Their society attained an astonishing level of sophistication in the field of neurosurgery. Using simple stone instruments, the ancient physicians performed delicate cranial operations to relieve pressure on the brain caused by congenital defects or injuries incurred in warfare. Amazingly, the survival rate for the patients was over 60%, as proven by the fact that after the operation, the bones continued to grow. Another unusual practice among the Peruvians was the deliberate disfiguration of the skull by binding, in childhood, with splints and straps, to achieve an effect which evidently was deemed to be attractive. From autopsies conducted upon human remains from Tijuanaco, certain investigators have suggested that the Peruvians performed advanced experiments aimed at altering the human genetic code. In this view, not only the physique of the people, but their internal organs as well, may have been designed by the genetic engineers, employing techniques taught to the native scientists by visitors from outer space. For genetic manipulation to succeed, the alteration of the chromosomal DNA must occur at the earliest level of development, before the fertilized ovum has begun to differentiate, evolving by a process as yet barely understood into the distinctive repertoire of cells which characterize the individual human being. So intricate and elusive is the mechanism of reproduction that it has become a convention to refer to the process as a miracle. And indeed, so it seems to be. For despite all our technical advances, we have yet to succeed in creating anything so magnificent as a single human life. How much more startling must it be if it should prove true that the ancient Peruvians were capable not of producing life, but of shaping it to their needs, fashioning by design men of phenomenal strength or incredible intellectual powers, the citizenry of a brave new world. To accomplish their objectives, the geneticists of Peru would have to understand the principles of chromosomal analysis, a technique employed today to determine the genetic contribution of would-be parents to their offspring. Small samples of white corpuscles from the blood or of body tissue are cultivated in an artificial culture under controlled conditions. Under an electron microscope, which produces sufficient magnification to permit the observation of individual cells, the nuclear material is segregated and photographed. The result is a family portrait of the chromosomes, spiral chains of nucleic acids which carry the genetic blueprint of the donor. Each chromosome is cut from the photographic plate and painstakingly arranged in pairs to prepare a kind of map of the donor's chromosomal pool. In some cases, the palm print of the patient is also examined to correlate physical features with the data from chromosomal analysis. From all the assembled data, a skilled technician can today make a fair prediction regarding the consequences of mating two individual parents. But this is still far removed from the art of genetic manipulation, intentionally altering the chromosomal material to create a made-to-measure human being. Yet there are those who claim that the humble men of Peru achieved exactly that 3 millennia ago. Certainly among the most spectacular achievements of modern medical science was the successful transplant of a human heart by South African surgeon Dr. Christian Barnard in 1967. Unfortunately, the patient who received the first heart transplant was unable to tolerate the new organ, and within a matter of months, he died. To combat this problem, Dr. Barnard now performs transplants without actually removing the damaged heart from the body. Thus, the patient lives with two hearts, the original model and the new transplanted organ. It is as yet too early to predict the long-term results, but to date, the operation has proved successful, an achievement undreamed of only a generation ago. Today, we take for granted medical advances such as this, but it is much more difficult to take for granted the notion that thousands of years ago, similar surgical techniques were routinely employed. On these rocks, supposedly recovered from the Paracas tombs, may be seen depictions of what appear to be primitive surgical procedures involving organ transplants and sophisticated blood transfusions. If the stones prove authentic, it is virtually impossible to escape the conclusion that the physicians of Paracas anticipated Dr. Barnard by 3,000 years. parallel is difficult to deny between the procedures shown on the Paracas stones and those practiced today by highly trained heart surgeons. In fact, each of the essential steps seems to be represented, from the preparation of the donor to the transfusion of blood to prevent rejection of the new organ. According to the drawings of these so-called medical stones, the Peruvian physicians were undoubtedly performing challenging and delicate operations. But to what end? To appease the gods in the manner of the later Mayans and Aztecs? Or to preserve human life? The details of the drawing support the latter conclusion, for the operations depicted here bear no resemblance to crude sacrificial rituals. Instead, they suggest sophisticated techniques intended to ensure the long-term well-being of the patient. Dr. Barnard, while expressing his admiration for the achievements of the past, confessed his skepticism that successful organ transplants had been achieved by primitive men.
A great study in medicine today is, why doesn't the pregnant mother reject the baby? Because the baby is something foreign growing inside the mother, and why doesn't the mother reject the child? There may be something in a pregnant woman.
Dr. Barnard is not alone in questioning the meaning of the medical stones. For to many observers, the probability seems remote that men who lack the alphabet or the wheel could have mastered the science of cardiosurgery, neurosurgery, and genetic engineering, to say nothing of spaceflight. In search of answers to the puzzle, we sought out Senor Ramon Ochoa, an Aymara Indian whose family has lived on the Paracas Peninsula for generations, personally excavating many of the ancient tombs. In Senor Ochoa's hut, he showed our reporter examples of the typical Paracas rock carvings which he has collected over the years, none of which bear medical or cosmological figures. In Senor Ochoa's considered opinion, based upon years of first-hand experience, none of the so-called medical stones are authentic, and many of the other controversial relics are simply clever forgeries sold to credulous collectors at a sizable profit. To demonstrate how the deception might work, Senor Ochoa dug out a public school primer printed in Spanish and widely distributed among the simple people of the Paracas Peninsula. Here in one place were pictured perfect models for many of the figures found on the Paracas stones, including extinct animals and birds, dinosaurs and spaceships, plus accurate information on the internal organs of the body. Certainly, there was no dearth of inspiration here for any enterprising entrepreneur inclined to try his hand at the sly art of forgery, altering figures in the appropriate manner to suit the style of the ancient artisans. Perhaps most significantly of all, the volume contained a complete chart of the cardiovascular system with a cogent description of the methodology of open-heart surgery and transplants. All that was needed to produce the fakes, as Senora Ochoa was eager to demonstrate, was a collection of native stones gathered from the plains of Paracas, plus the simplest of etching instruments. Indeed, even without modern tools, the task of carving the stones could hardly have been easier. In fact, with a little ingenuity and just a touch of patriotic zeal, an ancient Peruvian could be made to ride a rocket, replace the human spleen, or do battle with Megalosaurus. If there is doubt about the pedigree of some of the Paracas artifacts, there is little doubt about the authenticity of the curious map stones, which appear to depict the Earth as seen from space. Etched on stones which date from the first millennium BC are what seem to be the outlines of continents, complete with their characteristic flora and fauna. In spatial arrangement, however, the continents appear in the positions they occupied over 200 million years ago, as established by recent studies of the phenomenon of continental drift. In the 1960s, intensive work began at America's major oceanographic institutions to develop the technology needed to verify the continental drift hypothesis, one of the most startling scientific notions since Copernicus. Determine whether the continents had in fact wandered across the globe during the past few million years, a multifaceted assault was launched upon the ocean depths, the unknown world of inner space, where many of the secrets of our planet's past are locked. Mobilized now in the service of Earth science was much of the technology developed originally for the space program. Though now, instead of planetary probes and space platforms, the scientists would employ ocean-going satellites, electronic data-gathering outposts capable of recording information on tides, currents, temperatures, pressures, and magnetic fields around the clock in every kind of weather. According to the drift hypothesis, millions of years in the past, the continents had surged up from the ocean floor. And in order to prove or disprove this assertion, a detailed portrait of the seas would be required. A portrait assembled from millions of bits of data transmitted to listening posts around the world. At laboratories like Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla, California, the data was sifted and sorted to put together a composite picture of the watery realm, a picture which would hold important clues concerning the evolution of the Earth's crust. But the final proof of the theory would depend upon even more advanced technology, equipment of a type never before utilized on land or sea. To tackle the job, a fantastic fleet of strange sea-going craft were dispatched around the globe to begin the systematic study of the mysteries under the waves. Included in this armada were vessels capable of drilling cores in the seafloor, as well as ships which could upend in mid-ocean to hover above a fixed point on the map. Of particular interest to the oceanographers was the area in the mid-Atlantic where a deep trench transects the Earth from north to south. Here, the scientists reasoned, they might find evidence of so-called seafloor spreading, the upwelling of molten rock from the mantle of the Earth to force the continents apart. This vessel, appropriately christened by the code name Flip, was admirably suited for the task at hand. Positioned on station above the ocean ridge, it provided a stable platform for the detailed sampling and observation of the world that lay below. Week after week, Flip gathered its data, as a space station gathers data from a position above the moon, feeding the information to a control central thousands of miles away. Here, computer technology was brought to bear, correlating the data from Flip, the floating telemetry stations, and the deep drilling operations. The analysis of the results would demand the efforts of a small army of programmers, working with millions of dollars of advanced electronic hardware. Backing up the computer analysis was an ambitious program of experimental evaluation designed to simulate, under laboratory conditions, the forces operative beneath the mantle of the Earth, forces which over the ages may have shaped our destiny. While the public's attention was firmly fixed on outer space, the men of the Sea Probe patiently pursued their studies, privately aware of the incredible impact which their findings could have upon mankind. For if, in fact, the floor of the sea had spread, then many of the most cherished theories of geology, oceanography, biology, and even human evolution would have to be revised. What the experiments revealed was that all of the characteristic physical features of the Earth were indeed not immutable at all, but highly transitory, in constant flux and ferment. As with the land, so too with the life that clings to these shores, all subject to the same mysterious forces. Along the mid-Atlantic ridge, new crust is continually pushed to the surface, its molecules magnetized in accordance with the shifting position of the poles. From these observations, investigators were able to piece together the ancient outline of the continents, as well as to predict the shape of things to come. 50 million years from now, when North and South America will no longer be joined, and Greece will be swallowed by the sea. But, as some men have conjectured, if Greece can disappear in the future, is it not possible that other continents and civilizations have already disappeared? According to Plato, the great land of Atlantis, which lay to the west beyond the Pillars of Hercules, was submerged in a day and a night, obliterating a brilliant technological society. Oceanographic experiments have shown that the motion of the Earth's mantle causes devastating earthquakes and volcanoes along the lines of stress where the continental plates collide. And such may well have spelled the doom of Atlantis. But if so, what was this civilization which disappeared in fire and smoke? Increasing evidence suggests that it was none other than the Minoan island of Thera, known to have been destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption around 1500 BC. Today, Thera is a sleepy isle in the sunny Mediterranean, a land that betrays no hint of the superb civilization which once may have flourished there. But there is only one way to reveal Thera's secret. That is by descending into the deep, where the records of the past are locked. Yet, as the new generation of underwater archaeologists has discovered, the methods of the hard hat diver of old are of little use in probing the aquatic realm. If the riddle of Atlantis is to be solved, the explorer must have the latest in underwater technology at his disposal. No longer is the search for sunken lands the sole domain of the amateur adventurer. For now, sophisticated techniques of undersea exploration have served to revolutionize the technology and the science of archaeology. Developments are life support systems, which allow men to work for extended periods under the sea. The harsh environment of the deep makes unique demands upon the human system. And to conquer this alien domain, men are schooled in simulation tanks, where conditions may be adjusted to match those the diver will encounter on the ocean floor. Every man who descends beneath the waves, a dozen more must remain behind to monitor his performance and to provide ground support for the mission. As in the better-known space programs, today's aquanauts are veritable pioneers, pushing human capability to its limits in order to broaden the horizons of man. Just as space exploration promises to provide us with information on the history of the universe, so does the exploration of the aquatic realm promise insight into human history to fill the blank spaces in the book of planetary knowledge. Like the space program, the penetration of the deep has already reaped rewards. For the sea has served as a laboratory for testing hardware and personnel under the most stressful conditions that exist on our planet. Aquanaut, the challenge is great, but so is the incentive. To go where no man has gone, to descend into the shadowy reaches of mankind's secret past. In place of a spaceship, the modern aquanaut travels in a specialized submersible, a mini-sub capable of cruising hundreds of feet below the surface. The underwater investigator, a floating dive station is deployed, home base for the submersibles in which the scientist aquanauts will make their plunge into the realm of inner space. typical archaeological mission is as tense as that of a launch from Cape Canaveral, though the destination in this case may not be outer space, but man's ancestral home. From the surface, radio communication is maintained with the sub. When the initial survey is completed, the craft returns to the mothership. Several other submersibles are employed in the archaeological probe, each with its own unique capabilities. On the sea floor, the men and machines go to work, transmitting their observations to the surface via video cameras. In this way, not the divers alone, but many men may benefit from the first-hand encounter with whatever lies below the waves. Divers with scuba gear may use the sub as their base, exploring for hours on end at depths unheard of only a few short years ago. Although the locale of the dive is the Mediterranean, not far from the crowded beaches of the Aegean and the Adriatic, the objective of the mission reaches far beyond the confines of our own time or our own place. For in the view of some investigators, the legendary land of Atlantis met its fiery fate not thousands, but millions of years ago, long before the days of Plato, and long before the heyday of the earliest artisans of Peru. Furthermore, these researchers contend the ancient Atlantean civilization may well have been founded by voyagers from space, interplanetary emissaries whose impact was felt in classical Greece as it was in pre-Incan Peru. Scientists, then, the study has a special significance. For under the waters of the Mediterranean may lie incontrovertible proof of the antiquity of Atlantis, and possibly even a clue to its extraterrestrial origin. The competing theory of Atlantis, the one entertained by most serious scientists, contends that Thera, or Atlantis, was contemporaneous with ancient Greece, and that whatever remains beneath the waves will testify less to the handiwork of envoys from outer space than it does to the ingenuity of the ancient peoples of the Mediterranean. The men working here, part of an international team, may well harbor mixed feelings about the portent of the mission. For some, the dive on Thera may be solely a personal challenge, a test of technology and of human endurance. For others, the expedition may amount to little more than an absorbing adventure. But for a few among the group, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a chance to realize a dream, to plunge back in time, and to play spectator to some of the most securely guarded secrets of our planet's past. dives over a period of several days fail to establish contact with any ancient artifacts of man, let alone a sunken city. But the spirit of the endeavor never falters, for the sea is vast, and man's abilities to move there are as yet woefully inadequate. By analogy, one has only to visualize the enormity of the task of accurately surveying the Earth from a dirigible moored a mile or more above the surface. Legends have helped to narrow the focus of the search, but ultimately it remains an exhausting effort dependent upon unlimited patience and perseverance. One factor working against the mission is the murkiness of the water at the extreme depths of the probe. For this reason, it is decided to try a new tack. Divers are deployed to launch a remote-controlled mini-sub equipped with its own sources of power to propel it at high speed along the surface or underwater. Plus, sophisticated telemetry, including onboard sonar for navigation. In effect, the mini-sub operates as a robot diver, extending the sensory reach of man into the sea. From the expedition's mothership, the sub scrutinizes all in its path, employing high-resolution video cameras to send back images from the deep. Another robot probe serves as an underwater port for the sub, gathering samples from the sea floor and retaining them for study. The systems have been adequately tested. The mini-sub is ready for its primary mission. Directed by men on the surface, the craft begins its survey of the target area, transmitting to the eager eyes aboard ship pictures of all it sees. The subtlest maneuvers of the probe are coordinated with the commands of a human pilot, with the video camera functioning as the eyes of the man 500 feet below the surface. Backing up the robot probe is a team of top-notch divers whose task it is to serve as ground crew for the mini-sub mission. In the event that contact is made with a target of interest, diver-operated TV cameras are made ready, hopefully to record mankind's rediscovery of a long-lost world. straight into the operation on a day that began with a routine sweep of the area off Thea's southern rim. An intriguing anomaly appeared on TV monitors across the globe, sweeping the waters off the island of Bimini. Here were signs of strange seafloor features that had heretofore eluded the most sensitive instruments of the scientists. The center of operations was shifted to the Pacific Atoll. All the functions of the Atlantis probe were activated to begin a rigorous survey of the unexplored waters in and around the Bimini Ridge. The result, to some, was gratifying, for here, close to the surface off the island of Bimini, were what seemed to be the remains of a great boulevard or plaza paved with massive stones. The meaning of the discovery? As yet, it's too soon to tell. But for the moment, those who dreamed of golden temples were forced to revise their plans, shifting their search for Atlantis to still more promising waters. And so, Thera and Bimini remain secure in their secrets, and the quest for evidence of man's historic link to the cosmos moves once more to the locale where it began, on the high plateaus of Peru, where life's ancient rhythms survive unchanged. Here, on the bleak Toro Muerto desert in southern Peru, artisans of unknown origin, perhaps hundreds of years before the people of Paracas, of Nazca, of Tijuanaco, etched into stone an assemblage of unusual images, symbols of strange significance, whose meaning has been irretrievably lost in the sands of time. Included among these are animals now living, as well as those long extinct, in addition to curious images for which no plausible interpretation exists. To some eyes, these may seem the mere scratchings of primitive man, but to others they suggest an elaborate codified language, a kind of hieroglyphics employed to speak to the gods of the sky or to travelers from outer space. Some investigators have noted a parallel between these pictographs and the inscriptions etched on the statue of Viracocha, the weeping god of Tijuanaco. Inscriptions that could represent a secret code known only to the ancients. Whatever their purpose, the drawings of Toro Muerto have frustrated all efforts at interpretation. Though hard facts are in short supply, many researchers have been tempted to speculate on the portent of the petroglyphs. Some of these have pointed to similarities with the stone maps of Paracas, those purporting to depict the geography of the ancient Earth before powerful forces set the continents adrift. Perhaps, they reason, the triangles enclosing the continents symbolize these elemental forces, the tectonic energy fields that may have been harnessed by the great pyramids of Egypt. Or, in the New World, by the stone temples of the Mayas. Perhaps only now, in our recent forays into the cosmos, have we begun to perceive our planet as the ancients knew it, cognizant of its frailties and respectful of the prodigious powers locked beneath its crust. These television images flashed the news to all nations that men had left the Earth and joined the storied ranks of the voyagers in space. From this historic moment on, a new era had begun, an era of discovery and of hope.
Go, honey, keep going, baby. Keep going, baby.
Recorder.
Keep going. Look at her go, hon.
And again, thanks a lot. That's one small step for man.
But were we really first? Or had others long forgotten gone this way before us? The silent stones of the Toro Muerto might well hold the answer if they could only speak. Several of the stones suggest an intriguing possibility that the men who made them left the Earth aboard a giant spacecraft. Are these then the awkward images of men, or are they accurate visions of the cosmos? Perhaps one day we will know. Echoes of the ancient astronauts? Could it be, then, that the objects of fascination to the birdmen of Paracas were, in fact, what we call UFOs? Perhaps aboard their grand balloons, fashioned to resemble birds, the Nazca nobles witnessed UFOs sweeping through the southern sky. After all, if flying saucers are real, why should they appear only in our day? Around the world in recent decades, the rash of UFO reports has provoked responses ranging from wonderment to perplexity to impassioned belief. A more accurate reflection, perhaps, of our hopes and dreams than of the facts. But since 1947, there have been over 20,000 reports of so-called unidentified flying objects, with sightings in virtually every country on Earth. Many of these reports come from persons of unquestionable integrity, whose professional qualifications should not be taken lightly. And what of the overwhelming photographic evidence, both in still and motion pictures, which in many cases defy rational explanation by top scientific analysts? Surely not all can be labeled a hoax. The pilots of these craft, and what is their purpose? There are those who are convinced that the UFOs are spaceships of an alien civilization seeking to return to Earth. Such a theory would be in accord with the eyewitness accounts of spacemen encountered aboard UFOs which have landed. Strangely, most of the descriptions of these aliens bear a close resemblance to modern men, a fact which has aroused suspicion in such observers as astronomer Carl Sagan. According to him, quote, "The most likely circumstance is that extraterrestrial beings will look nothing like any organisms or machines familiar to men," end quote. Scientific caution, however, has not prevented artists from allowing free rein to their imaginations. From descriptions, the anatomy of the flying saucers has been reconstructed in detail, and elaborate theories have been forwarded to explain their locomotion. Are the men at the controls those foretold in the hieroglyphics of old? Are they the space pioneers for whom the ancient Peruvians waited when their society teetered on the brink of destruction? And were our UFOs the ships which took away the citizenry of Nazca, Paracas, and Tijuanaco before the death of Atlantis? We cannot yet answer the ultimate questions regarding the UFOs. But even as we debate, the list of sightings swells. One such incident occurred on a recent summer evening in San Jose de Vladera, a suburb of Madrid. Suddenly, an extraordinary object appeared before no fewer than 70 persons gathered in the street. By chance, two of these had cameras, and they photographed what they saw from several angles. A mass hallucination? That could hardly be conceivable. Or, as the old hieroglyphs suggest, a craft from another galaxy, come to save us from ourselves? Some claim to see the image of a cosmic pilot in an early Mayan carving, a portrait of the ruler Copan aboard what seems at first glance to be a rocket. It symptomatic of our stressful times, that UFOs have been invoked to account for virtually every unexplained natural phenomenon, effectively subsuming the role played by the gods in the cosmology of primitive man. But such fascination is far from new, says astronomer Lopez Arroyo, a student of the renowned stone circle of Stonehenge on England's Salisbury Plain. Erected in 2500 BC by agricultural people, the complex was carefully designed to serve as a kind of solar calendar to precisely predict the seasons. The efforts of these early Englishmen were among the first stirrings of astronomical science, the study of the realm beyond our Earth. With the advent of the telescope, new horizons were suddenly opened up, making possible the systematic scrutiny of the planets and the stars. Today, huge reflecting telescopes, located in observatories around the world, train their gigantic eyes on the heavens, probing the reaches of space in quest of new discoveries. And as they search, the limits of the known universe are steadily pushed further back. It is the firm belief of many serious scientists that beyond our solar system, as many as 100,000 advanced civilizations exist. Civilizations with which we might converse if we knew how. In an attempt to get the dialogue going, NASA, in 1971, launched the Pioneer 10 space probe, sending it past the moons of Mars and out into deep space, with a message of goodwill for any who might intercept it. Engraved on a plaque carried by the probe in its journey toward the stars was a capsulized summary of life as we know it, including a description of the solar system, plus portraits of typical Earthlings. And then the waiting began, a period that could last for 100 years, 1,000 years, or 100,000 years, depending upon how far away the nearest civilization is from the Earth. But many astronomers have agreed that we must do more than merely wait for an appropriate reply. If another civilization is nearby, then chances are it has already initiated efforts to communicate with us. And all we have to do is listen. With this in mind, a network of huge radio telescopes now scan the skies, searching for messages directed earthward from the stars. One of the largest of these facilities is the 1,000-foot radio radar antenna at Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico, jointly operated by Cornell University and the National Science Foundation. Dr. Manuel Bautista, the director, is almost certain that radio waves sent by other intelligent civilizations on distant planets are reaching the Earth. And if we listen long enough, at the right frequency, one day from outer space, will arrive the answer to the oldest and one of the most important questions that man has asked himself. Dr. Bautista has pointed out the limitations of the Arecibo scope for the detection of non-intentional messages from space, such as the noise from radio or TV communications on another planet intended for home consumption. For this purpose, Carl Sagan and others have proposed the construction of Cyclops, an array of 1,500 radio telescopes, each 300 feet in diameter, with each antenna connected to a single computer. Such a system would be capable of picking up normal TV transmissions from several hundred light years away. And at a price tag of only $10 billion, it could settle once and for all the nagging question of mankind's status in the universe. Already, the Arecibo telescope has begun to transmit a coded message into space, a message that informs the receiver that the Earth is populated by beings whose chemistry is based on organic molecules and whose genes are composed of DNA. The wonder of life, majesty of nature. Is all of this unique to us? Or are we just specks of cosmic dust, one planet in a billion, whirling in infinite space? Though we search everywhere for the answer, still it eludes us. But of this we may be certain. More things exist between heaven and earth than we have ever dreamed of. The path has been long, but who can doubt that the grand adventure is only beginning?